Every day, when we climb out of our comfortable beds, we risk not returning to them later that night. Every day we live, we have successfully evaded death for another 24 hours. The escapes can be the most simple of things, such as not falling down a flight of stairs, not slipping on a bar of soap in the shower, not getting into a car crash, or choking on your favorite meal. There are hundreds of things we manage to avoid by simply doing things like leaving the house 5 minutes earlier than normal, taking a different route somewhere, turning on the hall light before descending the stairs. These are just everyday examples. But what happens when you actually escape from someone who means you harm? The next 5 stories are about 5 people who managed to avoid becoming the next name added to a serial killer's list of victims. On a cold Seattle winter day in 1972, 22-year-old Satria Kristanis had been waiting for about an hour for a city bus to take her to her classes when a man in a Volkswagen Bug pulled up on Rainer Avenue South. The man called out to her, "Are you waiting for the bus?" To which she nodded. He then told her he had just come all the way down Rainer Avenue and there wasn't a bus in sight, then asked if she would like a ride. Being that it was the early 1970s and the man was well-dressed and nice-looking, she eagerly accepted the ride, never realizing she was about to get into a car with Ted Bundy. Happy to be out of the cold, Satria thought this would be a quick, warm ride to the school. But then, about a mile down the road, everything changed. Bundy began yelling at her, screaming, "Why did you take this ride? Why did you get into this car? You know you're not going to go to your destination." As Satria realized she was now in a serious situation, she considered jumping from the car, but saw the door handle had been removed and there was no way for her to open it. Soon, Bundy had driven up onto Interstate 5 and demanded she remove her wool cap from her head. Terrified she would anger him further, she quickly removed the cap and his face changed. Bundy stared, and then asked her softly, "Why did you cut your hair?" Satria had no answer. Bundy raged and screamed, continually asking her why she had cut her hair. Satria sobbed and begged for him to not hurt her. Suddenly she felt the car pull to an abrupt stop in front of her school. Bundy shoved her from the car and told her she was lucky and drove off. Satria never went to the police out of embarrassment. She was afraid of being ridiculed for getting into a stranger's car. A year and a half later, while watching television, she saw Bundy on the news and realized that he was the man she was in the car with, and the man who had ultimately let her go. Satria never knew if Bundy had been stalking her or not, but one thing she was certain of. If she had not gotten her hair cut the week prior, she would have most certainly been Ted Bundy's next victim that day. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair after committing no less than 30 murders between 1974 to 1978. Bundy's ability to disarm his victims with his easygoing demeanor and smile is what makes this case one of the most perplexing. Why would someone who actually held the promise of a real future allow himself to descend into the depths of human depravity? This is a question that unfortunately will never be answered. March 22, 1970, Modesto, California. Kathleen Johns and infant daughter are driving on Highway 132 when a car behind them begins honking and flashing its headlights. Kathleen pulls off to the side of the road, and the driver of the car behind her informs her that one of her tires is wobbling and offers to tighten the lug nuts on her wheel. Kathleen, concerned for the safety of her daughter and herself, agrees. Moments after the man drives away and she returns to the highway, her wheel immediately comes off. That man returns, telling her he was worried that might happen. He then offers to take her to a gas station just up the road. Once inside the car with her daughter, the man says to her, I didn't know you had a child with you." Kathleen thought it was an odd statement to make, but didn't give it much thought until they drove past the gas station. She informed the man they had just passed a station. He said to her it was closed and kept driving. Then he told her he was going to kill her and toss her baby out of the window. For 90 minutes he drove around near Tracy, California, and taunted Kathleen with threats of murder. It was about this time he found himself getting back up on Interstate 5, but in the wrong direction. When he backed up to turn around, Kathleen with her baby jumped from the car and hid in the tall grass near the road. The driver came looking for her with a flashlight, but soon ran off when a truck driver pulled up. She frantically hailed him, and the truck driver took her to the police station. While Kathleen was reporting the incident to the officers, she saw the police sketch on the wall for the Zodiac killer and screamed. "That's the man," she said, pointing to the wanted poster. When police drove out to Highway 132, they found Kathleen's car on fire. There have been discrepancies reported with this story by Kathleen John's account to Paul Avery, but according to Robert Graysmith, author of the book Zodiac, he believed Kathleen's story, and the Zodiac did take credit for it in one of the many letters that he sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. The case of the Zodiac killer still remains unsolved today, with the investigation still going on in Vallejo and Solano counties. Recently, DNA technology has been attempted to be applied once again to this case in the hopes that it will come to a close, as it did most recently with the Golden State Killer, also known as the original Night Stalker. Several suspects have been considered in the Zodiac case, with the most weight against Vallejo resident Arthur Lee Allen. However, no real evidence ever came to light against Allen, who died in the early 1990s. The last known official Zodiac letter to the press was in 1974. The true killer is either deceased, incarcerated for a different crime, or perhaps has left the country. It is not impossible for him to still be alive. For example, if he were 30 years old when the murders began, he would have to be about 80 years of age today. Perhaps somewhere out there, there's still a trail that leads to the Zodiac killer. Los Angeles, California, 1977. It's the era of disco music, Star Wars, the pet rock, and mood rings. A time when even in a place as large as Hollywood, it still felt safe to most. In November of that year, 29-year-old Catherine Lorre was on her way to an appointment when two officers stopped her on a sidewalk and asked her for identification. Sensing nothing was wrong, Catherine obliged. Upon opening her wallet, the two men saw, next to her ID, a photograph of actor Peter Lorre, next to a woman and holding a child. The child was Catherine as a little girl. The men soon realized that Peter Lorre is her father and thank her and send her on her way. The two men were Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono, also known as the Hillside Stranglers. Catherine would have been their fourth victim inside of 2 weeks. Kenneth Bianchi later admitted to police that he and his cousin, with fake badges, stopped Catherine with the intent of ordering her into their car. But when they realized who she was, they let her go. Not just because her name would have drawn unwanted attention to them, but because they knew Peter Lorre himself had portrayed a serial killer in Fritz Lang's 1931 film, M, a story about a man who murders little girls. In a twisted way, they both felt a kinship to Lorre's character in the film, which was based on real-life serial killer Peter Curtin, who committed several murders in Germany in 1929. Catherine was completely unaware how close she had come to becoming one of the 10 women murdered by Bianchi and Buono, until they were arrested and she saw them on television in 1979. It was only then she had remembered the kind, soft-spoken officers who stopped her on that Hollywood sidewalk that November day in 1977. The same two who would 7 days later murder Dolly Cepeda and Sonia Johnson, ages 12 and 14. The Hillside Strangler, later amended to the Hillside Stranglers, when police arrested Kenneth Bianchi in 1979 for 2 murders he committed on his own in Washington state. During his interrogation, he admitted that he and his cousin Angelo Buono were the Hillside Stranglers, thus bringing an end to the murder spree that took the lives of ultimately 12 victims in all. Angelo Buono died in prison in September 2002 from a heart attack. Kenneth Bianchi is still serving a life sentence in a Washington prison, where in 2025 he'll be eligible for parole. September 13, 1978. A light-hearted evening of television fun on the popular game show The Dating Game, where 3 prospective bachelors, hidden behind a wall, are interviewed by a single female through a series of fun questions. At the end, the girl selects one of the 3 bachelors based on their answers, and the game show provides a location and an evening of fun paid for by the network if the 2 decide to go on the date. Such was the case with Cheryl Bradshaw, as she engaged in cheeky, albeit sexually themed banter with bachelor number 1, Rodney Alcala, who claimed to be a skydiver, motorcycle enthusiast, and professional photographer, but was in reality a serial killer. By the time Alcala had appeared as a contestant on The Dating Game, he had already been in prison twice and had murdered 7 for certain, possibly 8. One of his victims was thought to be the work of the Hillside Strangler, for which Alcala was questioned by the FBI due to his history as a known sex offender. During the televised segment of The Dating Game, Bradshaw keeps coming back to bachelor number 1, Alcala, as his answers seem to be the most witty and comical. However, in one of his answers, Bradshaw asks, when is his best time? The insinuation being sexual, but Alcala replied flatly, nighttime. Why not daytime or morning, she asked. Well, they're okay, but nighttime is when it really gets good, then you're really ready. Bradshaw takes it up a notch and teases she's auditioning for special private classes and tells Alcala to be a dirty old man for her, to which he begins to growl like an animal. At the conclusion of the segment, Bradshaw chooses Alcala as her date, which is to take place getting professional tennis lessons and an afternoon at Magic Mountain Amusement Park, north of Hollywood. When it comes time for the date, Bradshaw decides not to go and turns Alcala down. She claims to family and friends there was just something too creepy about him. It seems Bradshaw's gut instinct was 100% correct, as Alcala would murder 3 more girls after his appearance on The Dating Game before being caught. In 2010, Rodney Alcala was sentenced to death for 5 murders he committed between 1977 to 1979. He was further convicted for 2 more murders in New York between 1971 and 1977. Today, he is 75 years old and is incarcerated at Corcoran's Men Colony in California. Thanks to the advancement of DNA, they were able to also connect several unsolved cold cases to Alcala, and upon discovering a trunk in a storage facility in Washington state filled with thousands of photographs he took of women, girls, and boys. Investigators believe Alcala may have murdered as many as 100 victims. June 1979, Wichita, Kansas. 63-year-old Anna Williams receives a letter in her mail that turns out to be a poem entitled, "Oh Anna, Why Didn't You Appear?" As Anna reads it, she quickly discovers to her horror that it was from the serial killer known as BTK, a monster that had already murdered 7 Wichita residents. Anna would later learn that in April of that same year, BTK had broken into her house and lay in wait for her. After several hours had gone by, he became frustrated and left, but took several personal items with him as souvenirs. Along with the darkly erotic poem that BTK wrote to Anna, which is listed in the description below, he also provided her with a sketch of some of the things that he had stolen to prove that he had been in her house. Luckily, Anna was out with friends that April night in 1978 and didn't come home at all. BTK, who was in reality Dennis Rader, a former ADT alarm installer, a compliance officer with the city, and president of the local Lutheran church. Rader later revealed in his confession that he had become obsessed with Williams and was absolutely livid that Williams had not come home that night, and even more enraged that she had managed to avoid his special plans for her. Anna, who had been a widow and lived alone for many years, was the perfect target for Rader. But the simple choice to stay out with friends that night turns out to be the best decision of her life. Once Williams learned that she was supposed to be BTK's next victim, she promptly moved away from Wichita, never to return. After 13 years of silence, the BTK began to communicate once again with the police and the media to remind them he was still walking the streets of Wichita after all this time. In a vain attempt to once again put the city in a state of fear, Dennis Rader used a computer disk to communicate with police in lieu of a typewritten letter. That disk was his undoing. After checking the metadata, police learned the program used to write the letter belonged to a computer at the Lutheran Church where Rader was president. After 25 years and 10 murders, BTK was no longer a threat to Wichita, Kansas. Today, Dennis Rader is serving 10 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for a minimum of 175 years.